What happens when the protector becomes the predator? When the one sworn to uphold justice twists it into a weapon of destruction? This is not just another story of crime. This is a story of betrayal so profound it shattered an entire community and left a nation questioning the very system meant to protect them. If you are not an advocate of domestic violence, murder, child abuse, to mention a few, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for more true crime stories. Thank you. It began in the most unassuming way. A well-respected judge, revered in his Texas community, a symbol of integrity and fairness. To the outside world, he was untouchable. He presided over courtrooms with authority, his decisions shaping lives, his reputation pristine. But behind the polished exterior lay a man hiding an unspeakable secret, a man whose desires crossed boundaries, shattered laws, and destroyed lives. At the center of this dark tale is a minor, a young life filled with hope, promise, and innocence, someone who should have been protected by the very system this judge represented. But instead of protection, they found themselves ensnared in a web of manipulation, deceit, and exploitation, a secret relationship that grew in the shadows, hidden behind closed doors and cloaked in silence. What should have been a scandalous revelation took a horrifying turn that no one could have foreseen. Then it happened. A crime so brutal, so unthinkable that it left even seasoned investigators stunned. A murder that seemed to appear out of nowhere, a life taken in cold blood. But as law enforcement began to dig deeper, what they uncovered wasn't just a crime. It was a labyrinth of lies, secrets, and horrors that pointed straight to the man no one would have suspected. The judge, powerful, respected, and utterly unrepentant. The investigation would reveal chilling details, a desperate attempt to cover his tracks, a calculated manipulation of trust, and a victim silenced to protect his darkest secrets. But that wasn't the end of the story. No. What came next was a courtroom drama unlike any other. The truth spilling out bit by agonizing bit, exposing the full scope of his betrayal, not just to the victim, but to the entire community he once served. This is not just the story of a crime. It's the story of power gone unchecked, of a man who believed he was untouchable, invincible, and above the very laws he once enforced. But even as justice was served, the scars left behind by his actions remain. For the families, for the community, for the system itself. How does a man go from being the epitome of justice to the embodiment of betrayal? How does a respected judge justify the abuse of his power, the destruction of innocence, and the taking of a life? And perhaps most disturbingly of all, how many more like him are hiding in plain sight? A story of power, greed, manipulation, and a descent into unimaginable violence. This is the tale of a Texas judge, an illicit affair, a chilling murder, and a life sentence that was not just deserved, it was inevitable. What drove this man to such depths? What secrets did he hide? And how did a system built on trust allow one of its own to betray it so completely? This is a story that will haunt you, a story that reveals the fragility of justice and the consequences when power is abused. Stay with us as we uncover the dark, twisted path that led to the downfall of a man who thought he was above the law and the lives left shattered in his wake. It was 2017 in Texas town where life moved at an unhurried pace. Nestled between rolling fields and sun-drenched streets, this was a community that prided itself on its close-knit bonds and traditional values. The courthouse stood as a symbol of law, order, and fairness. Inside that courthouse, presiding over countless cases, was Judge William Carter. Judge Carter was a man everyone trusted. Respected by his peers, admired by his community, and known for his sharp intellect and unshakable demeanor, he was the face of justice in this quiet town. To many, he wasn't just a judge. He was a role model, a figurehead of integrity. His life seemed picture perfect. A loving family, a distinguished career, and a reputation that appeared untarnished. But beneath the surface of this idyllic image, there were whispers. Small, fleeting comments that didn't seem to stick. Rumors that he had a penchant for secrecy, that perhaps his public persona didn't entirely match his private life. Still, no one dared question a man of his stature, not until the cracks began to show. It started with Daniela Wilson, a teenager full of life and ambition. At just 17, she had big dreams of leaving her small town behind. She wanted to study journalism, see the world, and make a difference. But Daniela was also vulnerable, navigating the challenges of adolescence and eager for guidance. When she crossed paths with Judge Carter at a local mentorship program, it seemed like an opportunity of a lifetime. He took an interest in her, offering advice, encouragement, and a listening ear. To outsiders, it looked innocent, an accomplished man guiding a young mind. But behind closed doors, their interactions took a darker turn. What began as mentorship spiraled into something sinister, a relationship shrouded in secrecy and lies. Judge Carter used his power, his influence, and his charm to manipulate Daniela, pulling her into a web she couldn't escape. She confided in him, trusted him, and believed his promises. But little did she know, this path would lead to a tragic fate. Then there was Darius Raymond, a local contractor with no connection to Daniela. Darius was an ordinary man, hard-working and unassuming. He had no reason to suspect that his life would intersect with the judge's in such a devastating way. But soon, Darius would become the unknowing victim of a deadly chain of events, entangled in a story far darker than he could ever have imagined. For years, Judge Carter maintained his facade, presenting himself as the man who could do no wrong. But rumors have a way of growing, and in a town as small as this, secrets don't stay hidden for long. Whispers turned into quiet accusations. Some claimed to have seen him with Daniela in places they shouldn't have been. Others noticed changes in Daniela, her once bright demeanor replaced by quiet unease. But there was no proof, no solid evidence, just speculation. Still, the cracks in Judge Carter's carefully constructed life were becoming harder to ignore. His colleagues began to notice his erratic behavior, missed deadlines, unexplained absences, a sense of distance. Behind the scenes, he was struggling to maintain control as the weight of his secrets began to consume him. And then, like a dam finally breaking, the rumors turned into something much worse. A murder. When the news of Darius Raymond's death spread, the town was stunned. A man with no enemies, no reason to be targeted, found lifeless under circumstances that didn't add up. But as investigators dug deeper, the connections began to emerge. What seemed like an isolated incident was anything but. The truth was more shocking, more horrifying than anyone could have imagined. What happened to Daniela Wilson? Why did Darius Raymond become a target? And how did the man who symbolized justice find himself at the center of a murder investigation? The answers to these questions would unravel a tale of power, manipulation, and betrayal that would leave this quiet Texas town forever changed. Their first meeting seemed almost innocuous. Judge William Carter, with his commanding presence and well-rehearsed charm, had volunteered to speak at a local mentorship program for high school students. It was the kind of event that he regularly attended, an opportunity to project his image as a community leader and someone invested in the town's future. Among the dozens of teenagers listening intently that day was Daniela Wilson, her notebook in hand, eyes wide with admiration for the judge's eloquent words. To Daniela, this was an incredible moment. Here was a man who embodied success, someone she could look up to as she charted her own path. After the session, she hesitated near the front, clutching her notebook nervously. Judge Carter noticed her and offered a kind smile. "You have a question?" he asked. That question turned into a conversation, and that conversation turned into the beginning of something far more insidious. Over the weeks that followed, their interactions grew more frequent. It started with small gestures, encouraging words after school events, occasional emails about her writing, advice about her future. Daniela, young and impressionable, saw these moments as acts of kindness from a mentor who genuinely cared about her. But Carter's intentions were anything but pure. Slowly, he began to blur the lines between professional and personal, each interaction more intimate than the last. He would tell her how mature she was, how different she was from other girls her age, and Daniela, vulnerable and eager for validation, believed him. The secrecy surrounding their encounters became a game to Carter. He insisted they keep their meetings private, emphasizing the importance of discretion. He framed it as something special, something only they shared. At first, Daniela didn't question it. After all, this was a man she admired, someone she trusted completely. But what she didn't see was how carefully Carter was exploiting that trust, weaving a web of manipulation that ensnared her completely. For Carter, this wasn't just about power, it was about control. He dictated when they could meet, what they could talk about, and how she should respond to others who might ask questions. Daniela, too naive to recognize the signs, complied without hesitation. To her, this was a relationship built on respect and affection. To him, it was a carefully calculated game to feed his ego and fulfill his darkest desires. At first, no one noticed anything unusual. Judge Carter was a master of appearances, and Daniela did her best to act normal, though cracks were beginning to show. Her friends noticed that she was distracted, quieter than usual. She stopped talking about her plans to leave for college and seemed more withdrawn. At home, her parents chalked it up to teenage stress, never imagining that their daughter had been pulled into something so sinister. But in a town as small as theirs, secrets don't stay hidden for long. Whispers began circulating. Someone claimed to have seen Carter and Daniela together at a coffee shop on the outskirts of town. Another said they spotted his car parked near her school far too often. At first, these whispers were dismissed as baseless gossip. After all, who would believe that a man as respected as Judge Carter could be involved in something so inappropriate? But the whispers grew louder, spreading through the town like wildfire. His colleagues began noticing changes too. Carter, once meticulous and focused, started showing signs of strain. He missed deadlines, seemed distracted during hearings, and was unusually short-tempered. Some attributed it to stress, but others couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Meanwhile, Daniela's teachers began expressing concern about her slipping grades and frequent absences. When they tried to talk to her, she brushed them off, offering vague excuses that didn't quite add up. And yet, even as the rumors spread and the signs became harder to ignore, no one could have predicted what would happen next. What began as whispers of an inappropriate relationship would soon unravel into something far darker, something that would shock not only this small Texas town, but the entire nation. Because for Judge Carter, controlling Daniela wasn't enough. When the walls of his carefully constructed life began to close in, his desperation would drive him to commit an act so horrific it would stain the very institution he once represented. This wasn't just a scandal, it was the start of a much darker spiral, one that would end in betrayal, blood, and the shattering of countless lives. It was a warm summer evening in late June when the tranquility of this small Texas town was shattered. Darius Raymond, a 42-year-old local contractor, was known for his easygoing nature and dedication to his family. He had no enemies, no history of trouble, just a simple life built around hard work and love for his wife and 2 young sons. But on that fateful night, everything changed. Darius had been out late, working on a remodeling project just outside town. He called his wife to let her know he'd be home around 9 p.m., but as the hours ticked by, Darius never returned. His wife's calls went unanswered, her worry growing with every passing minute. By morning, panic had set in. Darius's truck was found abandoned on a remote dirt road, the driver's side door slightly ajar. Inside, there were no signs of struggle, just his phone lying on the passenger seat, screen shattered. Hours later, the discovery no one wanted to believe came to light. Darius's body was found in a shallow ditch a few miles away. He had been shot twice at close range, the precision of the wounds chillingly deliberate. The once peaceful community was rocked to its core. Who would want to harm a man like Darius Raymond, and why? The investigation began immediately, with local law enforcement scouring the scene for clues. The ditch where Darius's body was found offered little in the way of evidence. The area was isolated and there were no eyewitnesses. However, investigators did find one critical piece of evidence: tire tracks near the ditch that didn't match Darius's truck. They also noticed something strange about Darius's hands. His knuckles were bruised as if he had been in a struggle before his death. As investigators dug into Darius's life, they found nothing to suggest he had enemies. He was well liked in the community, a devoted husband and father, and had no known conflicts. But then something curious surfaced. Through interviews with Darius's friends and co-workers, detectives learned that he had recently confided in someone about a concern, something he had seen, something he wasn't sure how to handle. Darius hadn't gone into detail, but he had mentioned the name Judge William Carter. At first, the connection seemed tenuous. Why would a respected judge have anything to do with the death of a local contractor? But as the investigation continued, more threads began to unravel. Detectives learned that Darius had been working on a property owned by Judge Carter, a secluded cabin outside of town. According to Darius' co-workers, he had mentioned seeing or overhearing something unusual while working there, something involving a young girl. Investigators began to piece together a timeline. On the night of his death, Darius had received a phone call, traced later to a burner phone, urging him to meet someone at the remote road where his truck was later found. The caller's identity was unknown, but detectives couldn't ignore the growing ties to Judge Carter. They obtained a warrant to search the judge's cabin and found evidence that raised more questions than answers. Hidden in a locked desk drawer was a set of photographs, grainy but unmistakable, showing Judge Carter with Daniela Wilson in situations far too intimate to be dismissed as mentoring. The photographs painted a damning picture, but they also raised the stakes of the investigation. Could Darius have stumbled upon these photos? Had he tried to confront Carter only to pay the ultimate price? The detectives couldn't yet be sure, but the evidence was mounting. A search of the judge's car yielded even more troubling findings. A pair of gloves, a small amount of blood on the passenger side floor mat, and gunpowder residue on the driver's seat. Still, it wasn't enough to make an arrest. They needed a motive, something to tie all the pieces together. And then, the break came. A witness, a young man who had been hiking near the cabin on the night of Darius's murder, came forward. He reported hearing raised voices and what sounded like an argument coming from the direction of the cabin, followed by 2 gunshots. He didn't see who was involved, but the timing and location matched the crime scene. With this new information, detectives pressed harder. They brought Daniela Wilson in for questioning, and what she revealed turned the case on its head. Through tears, Daniela admitted that Judge Carter had manipulated her into a relationship. But what shocked investigators even more was her admission that Darius had been trying to protect her. She said Darius had discovered the affair and was planning to expose the judge, despite Carter's attempts to threaten and bribe him into silence. This revelation changed everything. What had once appeared to be a senseless act of violence was now a calculated murder, orchestrated by a man desperate to protect his secrets. But while suspicions ran high, law enforcement knew that suspicions alone weren't enough. They needed hard evidence, irrefutable proof that would hold up in court. Their first step was Daniela's phone. As a minor, her parents had given permission for investigators to comb through her text messages, emails, and call logs. What they found was damning. Carter had sent Daniela hundreds of messages over the course of their relationship, many of them written in code to obscure their meaning. He referenced private meetings, pressured her into secrecy, and, in the weeks leading up to the murder, warned her repeatedly about outsiders who might ruin everything. One particular message stood out. Sent just 2 days before Darius Raymond's death, Carter wrote, "Loose ends have a way of tying themselves up. Stay quiet." Investigators also obtained Carter's financial records, where they uncovered another clue. A week before the murder, Carter had made a large cash withdrawal from his personal savings account. Witnesses reported that Carter rarely carried cash, preferring credit cards for most transactions. Yet here he was, withdrawing $10,000 with no clear explanation. This raised red flags. Could the cash have been intended to bribe Darius Raymond into silence? And when that failed, did Carter resort to more drastic measures? Meanwhile, forensic experts worked tirelessly on the physical evidence recovered from Carter's car. The bloodstains on the floor mat were a genetic match to Darius Raymond, and gunpowder residue on the driver's seat suggested the judge had recently fired a weapon. Investigators compared the tire tracks from the crime scene to those of Carter's vehicle, and the results were conclusive. They matched perfectly. Piece by piece, the walls were closing in on Carter. But perhaps the most shocking discovery came from the burner phone recovered during a search of Carter's office. The phone, carefully hidden in a locked drawer, was the same one used to call Darius Raymond on the night of his murder. Investigators traced its call history and found a series of ominous messages sent to Darius in the days leading up to his death. The messages contained veiled threats, suggesting Darius would face serious consequences if he didn't stay silent. One of the final messages read, "You don't know who you're dealing with." While this evidence painted a chilling picture, investigators knew they still needed to establish Carter's motive. Why would a respected judge risk everything to commit such a heinous crime? Forensic psychologists brought in to analyze the case shed light on Carter's behavior. They described him as a textbook narcissist, someone who thrived on control and believed himself to be untouchable. To Carter, his relationship with Daniela wasn't just an abuse of power, it was a way to reinforce his own superiority. When Darius threatened to expose the truth, it wasn't just a risk to Carter's career, it was a blow to his fragile ego. The murder, they concluded, wasn't just about silencing Darius. It was an act of desperation by a man who believed his carefully constructed world was crumbling. Legal experts weighed in, highlighting the sheer audacity of Carter's actions. As a judge, he understood the system better than most. He knew how to manipulate evidence, intimidate witnesses, and exploit loopholes. This wasn't just a crime of passion. It was a calculated attempt to protect his secrets and maintain the facade of respectability. But in his arrogance, Carter underestimated the resilience of those determined to bring him to justice. The case against Carter seemed airtight, but the judge wasn't ready to go down without a fight. He used his connections, his resources, and his knowledge of the legal system to mount an aggressive defense. He denied everything, claiming the evidence was circumstantial, the texts were fabricated, and the witnesses were unreliable. He painted himself as a victim of a smear campaign, orchestrated by those jealous of his success. And for a moment, his arguments gained traction, sowing seeds of doubt in the minds of some. But even as Carter fought to maintain his innocence, investigators uncovered one final piece of evidence that would change everything. Hidden in the depths of his personal laptop was a file labeled simply as insurance. Inside were dozens of documents, photographs, and recorded conversations that Carter had kept as leverage, proof of his manipulation, his threats, and his darkest secrets. The file not only tied him to the murder of Darius Raymond, but revealed a pattern of coercion and abuse spanning years. It was the nail in the coffin. Carter's desperate attempts to deflect blame crumbled under the weight of the evidence. The once untouchable judge now stood exposed, his carefully curated life laid bare for all to see. The trial of Judge William Carter was nothing short of a spectacle. It drew national attention, not only for the shocking nature of the crime, but for the prominence of the accused, a man who had once been the face of justice in this small Texas town. The courthouse was surrounded by a throng of reporters, curious onlookers, and community members seeking answers. Many carried signs demanding justice for Darius Raymond, while others bore quiet expressions of disbelief that someone so revered could fall so far. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense. On one side sat the prosecution, led by District Attorney Linda Price, a sharp and relentless lawyer determined to see Carter held accountable. On the other side, Carter's defense team, an assembly of high-profile attorneys hired with the remnants of his wealth and the backing of some still loyal allies. Carter himself remained stoic, dressed impeccably as always, though the strain of the proceedings showed in his tightly clenched jaw and cold stare. The prosecution opened with a damning statement, laying out a chilling timeline of events that painted Carter as a man who had methodically planned the murder to silence Darius Raymond. District Attorney Price didn't mince words as she described Carter's manipulation of Daniela Wilson and his relentless pursuit of power and control. She presented the jury with the mountain of evidence uncovered during the investigation, the threatening text messages, the burner phone, the blood-stained floor mat, and the damning file labeled insurance. Judge Carter wore the robes of justice, Price declared, her voice unwavering. But beneath them hid a man willing to destroy anyone who stood in the way of his secrets. The defense, however, countered with a strategy aimed at creating doubt. They argued that the evidence was purely circumstantial, that the prosecution's case relied too heavily on assumptions, and that Carter had been unfairly targeted due to his position of power. Lead defense attorney Gerald Marshall argued that the photographs and texts could have been fabricated, the tire tracks inconclusive, and the witness testimony unreliable. "This is a witch hunt," Marshall declared, "a rush to judgment against a man who dedicated his life to serving this community." Carter himself took the stand in a calculated move. Calm and articulate, he denied all allegations, painting himself as the victim of a smear campaign. He admitted to knowing Daniela Wilson but claimed their relationship had been strictly professional. He expressed condolences to Darius Raymond's family, but firmly denied any involvement in the murder. "I have faith in this system," Carter stated, his voice steady. "I believe the truth will prevail." But the prosecution was prepared. In a masterful cross-examination, District Attorney Price dismantled Carter's facade piece by piece. She confronted him with the evidence, forcing him to address each text, each financial record, each damning clue. When asked about the burner phone, Carter hesitated for the first time, his polished demeanor cracking under the weight of the question. I don't recall where that came from," he stammered, a moment that sent whispers rippling through the courtroom. One of the most emotional moments of the trial came when Daniela Wilson took the stand. Now 18, she appeared visibly shaken as she recounted her experiences with Carter. Her voice trembled as she described how he had manipulated her, isolated her from her family, and made her feel trapped in a web of lies. "He told me no one would believe me," she said through tears. "He said he was untouchable." The courtroom was silent, save for the quiet sobs of Daniela's mother in the gallery. Equally powerful was the testimony of Darius Raymond's wife, Amy. Clutching a photo of her late husband, she spoke of the devastating impact his murder had on their family. "Darius was a good man," she said, her voice breaking. "He didn't deserve this. Our children didn't deserve to lose their father." Her words brought many in the courtroom to tears, a stark reminder of the human cost of Carter's actions. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict. As the courtroom held its collective breath, the foreperson stood and delivered the words that would seal Carter's fate. Guilty on all counts. The former judge, once the embodiment of authority and justice, now faced a lifetime behind bars. At the sentencing hearing, the judge overseeing the case delivered a scathing rebuke. "You, William Carter, used your position to exploit, manipulate, and destroy lives. You have shown no remorse for your actions, and for that you will spend the rest of your life in prison." The courtroom erupted in emotion. Some cheered, others wept, and Carter himself sat motionless, his once impenetrable facade now shattered. Outside, the public reaction was equally intense. Many viewed the verdict as a victory for justice, while others saw it as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power. The trial's conclusion brought some sense of closure, but for Daniela Wilson, the road to healing was just beginning. The years of manipulation and abuse she endured left deep scars, both emotional and psychological. Counselors and advocates worked closely with her, helping her reclaim a sense of agency and rebuild her shattered confidence. For Judge Carter, the man who once commanded respect and wielded influence, the reality of his new life was starkly different. Sentenced to life in prison without parole, Carter faced a future stripped of the privileges he had once taken for granted. Behind bars, he became just another inmate, no longer shielded by his title or reputation. The story of William Carter, Daniela Wilson, and Darius Raymond became more than just a headline. It became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the devastating consequences of unchecked power and the resilience of those who fight for justice. In the end, it wasn't just about the fall of a corrupt judge. It was about a community's determination to seek accountability, a survivor's courage to rebuild her life, and a nation's resolve to confront the darker corners of its justice system. As Daniela Wilson continues to heal, her story serves as a beacon of hope. For communities everywhere, the message is clear. No one is above the law, and justice, though sometimes delayed, can prevail. But perhaps the most important takeaway is this: when we confront the truth, no matter how painful, We pave the way for a brighter, safer future. Once again, if you are not an advocate of domestic violence, murder, child abuse, to mention a few, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for more true crime stories. Thank you.